So, getting into more complex concepts, fascism is socialism, but it's not National Socialism. So, one of the things that socialists of Italy were beginning to understand was the idea that Marxist revolution was never coming to the industrialized West. Oh, there were still some communist diehards, but overwhelmingly the socialists were seeing this as a dead end. Mussolini started out politically as a member of the Italian Socialist Party. And one of the things to understand is he never, for a moment, ever changed his socialist beliefs. Now, World War I created a huge dilemma for the socialists. The socialists of the world like to look at themselves as kind of brothers, the workers of the world uniting, so to speak. And so overwhelmingly, they were pacifists. They did not like war because you were essentially setting one group of the workers of the Brotherhood against another. Now, what would happen is World War One became very enticing to all the socialists of Europe. No, okay, not all. It essentially created a situation where all socialists of Europe were questioning what was going on. Some of the socialists would essentially go entirely to bat for their country, saying, yes, we as socialists must get behind this effort. Some of the countries, the Socialist Party split, where half of them say, no, must stay true to our roots. This is an international brotherhood of workers, where others said, no, we need to back our government. And the reason why this happened was socialists saw this as an opportunity where this war was clearly going to cause massive social upheaval. And by helping with the war effort, they would be in a position to capitalize and exploit the aftermath of the war. Now, overwhelmingly, the Italian socialists stayed in the international camp. And this caused Benito Mussolini to split because he believed in the nationalist version of things. So he and a cadre of socialists broke off to form what would eventually become the Fascist Party. Now, interestingly, consider that no one ever accused French socialists of not being socialists because they backed World War One. No one accused German socialists of not being socialists because they backed World War One. So Mussolini breaking out from the rest of the Socialist Party to create a socialist splinter group called the Fascists, who happened to back World War One, doesn't strip him of his uh, socialist credentials. Fascists believed in class conflict, just as Marx did. Uh, Whereas Marx believed that there needed to be war between the classes and one class needed to come out on top. The fascists believed that class conflict could be ended by joining the classes in syndicates. Essentially, the conflict would be moderated by the state to bring all the classes together in a form of unity. A concept the Italians had was something called, hopefully I'm not butchering this, spazio vitale. It essentially means vital space, if I'm reading that properly. And this is their theory of why they needed to conquer the Mediterranean sphere and partially into Africa. Uh, what made their system very, very different than the National Socialist model in Germany is their goal was to actually colonize all these conquests. And then they would civilize the people of their colonies through fascist revolution and eventually make them their own little fascist subsidiaries. One of the reasons why they believed they needed to do this is because they believed in the socialist theory of the shrinking market theory. The socialist theory believed that capitalist systems would eventually starve themselves of food and raw materials because the process of industrializing uh, would essentially force them to specialize in industrializing, and they wouldn't be able to mine uh, or do proper farming. So the idea is for Spazio Vitale would be that the colonies would remain the source of raw materials and food, whereas Mother Italy would become the industrial center, and thus they would avoid the shrinking market theory. Believing in the shrinking market theory is a strong indicator of them being socialists, considering it's part of socialist theory. Uh, in fascism, all Italians were part of the nation, including Jewish Italians. If you understood Italy at the time, Italy had only been bound together as a country for about 50 years at this point, and there was no true idea of Italian nationality for a long, long time. Italy had been made up of numerous kingdoms. They had distinct dialects, and uh, as you head south, there is a change in skin tone that marks a difference between northern Italians and southern Italians. Um, in the view of Italian fascism, there was no difference between the northern and southern Italians. There was no difference between them and Sicilians. If you were in part of what they considered Italy, you were an Italian no matter what. If you were born there, you were an Italian. So the Italians, and by the way, just a little bit more on Jewish Italians. Jewish Italians occupied the hierarchy of the fascist party. Uh, they were uh, essentially left alone by the Italian fascists until they became a junior partner of the German National Socialists. And late in the war, when they became a puppet, it was the only time they started actively collaborating with National Socialism as part of the Holocaust. So the way Italian fascism would spread socialism was via the trade unions, via the creation of syndicates. Essentially, the way the syndicates would work is you would have essentially the workers forming up and essentially creating a union, and they would have their representatives. The factory owners would also be part of the syndicate, and there would also be government representatives on the syndicate. So these representatives would all come together to collaborate in order to uh, essentially eliminate the lines of classhood and basically create harmony in order to uh, have all production done on behalf of the state. Now, syndicalism actually predates uh, Marxism. Syndicalism was a concept that came up in the 1830s as a methodology of implementing socialism. Uh, National syndicalism is a variant, whereas the syndicalism was kind of thinking the whole workers of the world thing. National syndicalism was, well, the workers of Italy first. So this syndicalism idea is deeply rooted in socialism. It's just rooted in pre Marxian socialism. Now, once the syndicates are established, they could seize and redistribute property at will. So, for instance, if you had 5 aircraft factories operating and they were formed up as a syndicate, the syndicate could decide and say, hey, that fifth factory is extraneous. It's not, we don't actually need competition. We need less of things. And they could literally shut them down, strip them of their equipment, and send it out to the other factories. And the syndicate could say, okay, well, factory one, you know, you're going to be making transport planes. Factory two, you're going to be making fighter planes. Factory three, you're going to be making bombers. Factory four, you're going to be doing research and development. And they would have no choice but to follow. Uh, by the way, that particular system I just described there is what a lot of people who are attempting to say Italians weren't socialists saying, "Oh, that was capitalism." Nope, not remotely. By 1939, Mussolini fascists controlled 80% of the Italian economy. Areas still under corporate control were under control of corporations approved by the fascist government for their ability to comply with government direction. Corporations that failed to follow government edicts were absorbed or dissolved by the syndicates. Uh, Another important thing to know about Italian fascists and German National Socialists is they came very close to going to war with each other. And the only reason they ended up allying in the end is because for a while there it appeared that Germany was going to win and Italy was afraid it was going to miss out on the spoils. Uh, Something we'll talk about in a future video, but the Germans, the German National Socialists, and the Russian Soviet Socialists were collaborating for a decade before the National Socialists and the Italian Fascists figured out how to work together.